Welcome back to Horror Stories Hub, where America's darkest corners are brought into the light. Every state has its secrets, its whispered tales, and its fears that never sleep. Today, we're not traveling far. We're going deep into the bayous of Louisiana, a land of haunting beauty and ancient legends. But for one immigrant family, this promised land would become a living hell when a devil from their homeland seemed to cross 1,000 miles of ocean to hunt them. This is Ibon's story, a story of love, betrayal, and an ancient horror with an unspeakable name. Everything you are about to hear is told entirely from her perspective. Our advice? Double-check your locks.
It's out there. I know it's out there. That. Ellie shoved me in the room, his eyes wild with terror, and just managed to whisper, "Stay here, don't make a sound." But how can I stay quiet? I can hear his mother. I can hear her screaming in a language I don't understand, an ancient curse being hurled into the yard. I hear the sound of something tearing, something dry and awful. My stomach clenches, but it's not just from fear. It's a different pain. A sharp, piercing agony like a knife twisting inside me. The baby, my baby, he's kicking. He's kicking frantically as if he can feel it too, as if he knows. That monster is here for him. I slam my hand over my mouth, choking back a scream. The stench of swamp mud and rotting meat seeps through the cracks in the walls. It knows I'm in here. Oh God, it knows we're here. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Just a few months ago, I thought I finally had everything. The first crack appeared on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon. Ellie came home earlier than usual, his face pale, his shoulders slumped as if carrying an immense weight. He collapsed onto the sofa and just sat there in silence. I went to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. I lost my job, Ivan. His voice cracked. They told him the company was restructuring, an excuse so generic it was insulting. I knew it was a lie. And deep down, so did Ellie. The truth came out 2 days later, a phone call from a former coworker. I was in the kitchen, but I could hear Ellie's strained voice from the living room. I heard him repeat a name over and over as if he couldn't believe it. When he hung up, he looked at me and I knew something terrible had happened. He told me his replacement was Alexis. My brother, my heart stopped. Alexis, he hadn't just disowned me. He wanted to destroy us. I screamed that I would talk to them, that I wouldn't let him do this, but Ellie stopped me. He said he didn't want to work in the same company as him anyway, that he'd find another, better job. But he never found another job. It felt like an invisible hand was pulling strings behind the scenes. Every interview, no matter how promising it seemed, ended with a polite rejection. Every door was slammed in his face. Our savings began to drain like sand through an hourglass. The pressure mounted, choking the happy air out of our small apartment. And then the harassment began. A calculated campaign of psychological terror. First, it was the anonymous calls in the middle of the night, just breathing on the other end, then a click. Then came the strange cars with tinted windows circling our block, slow and menacing. One time, as we were leaving the grocery store, a group of Alexis's friends cornered us in the parking lot. They didn't touch us, but their vulgar words and leering eyes were worse than a physical blow. The fear sent a sharp pain through my abdomen, and I ended up in the hospital. The doctor said I was at risk of a miscarriage, that I needed to avoid all stress. How could I avoid it when stress was actively hunting us? That night, as I was waiting for Ellie at the hospital, He walked in, his face bruised, his shirt torn, one eye already swelling shut. I gasped. He told me that on his way over, a group of strangers had blocked his car, dragged him out, and beat him without saying a word. He didn't recognize them, but we both knew who sent them. I sobbed, demanding we call the police, but Ellie just shook his head, his voice laced with despair. He said it would only make Alexis angrier. Ivan? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a fear I'd never seen before. We can't stay here anymore. He's not going to leave us alone. He knows where we are. Terror consumed me. We were trapped. No money, no job, and an enemy who seemed to be everywhere at once. It was then, in that moment of absolute desperation, that Ellie offered a solution. A solution that would take us out of this hell, only to plunge us into another, one far, far darker. He said, We have to go to my parents' place, back home. Your brother can't find us there. The journey to Ellie's childhood home felt like a silent escape. A full day on a train, 6 hours on a musty, rattling bus, and finally, a shaky motorboat ride that took us deep into the bayou. The further we went, the more suffocated I felt. Giant cypress trees draped in Spanish moss hung over the water like skeletal arms. The water itself was black and still, broken only by the boat's wake. It felt like we were traveling to the end of the world, to a place time had forgotten him. His parents' house was a small, dilapidated wooden cabin, swallowed by the isolation of nature. Pancho and Rosalia, Ellie's parents, greeted us with an awkward silence. Their eyes scanned over me, devoid of warmth, then lingered on my growing belly. I heard his mother say, her voice flat and emotionless, "You'll be staying a while." It wasn't a question. It was a cold statement of fact. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The room smelled of damp and decay. Outside, the night wasn't quiet like in the city. It was terrifyingly alive. The constant chirping of insects, the crack of a branch in the dense woods, the mournful cry of some unknown animal in the dark. I had the unshakable feeling that thousands of unseen eyes were watching us from just beyond the window pane. In the days that followed, Ellie found a job in the nearest town, which meant he had to leave before sunrise and wouldn't return until after dark. I was left alone with his mother. Rosalia took care of me, but in a strange, unsettling way. She cooked me meals I'd never seen before with the pungent taste of strange roots and herbs that made my stomach turn. She was always warning me about odd superstitions, that I shouldn't sit on the doorstep at twilight, that I shouldn't cut my nails after dark. One morning, I followed her advice and sat on the porch to get some sun. The warmth felt good. I closed my eyes, and instantly the feeling washed over me. That prickling sensation on my skin that meant someone was watching me. The exact same feeling I had back in New Orleans when the strange cars would circle. I snapped my eyes open, scanning the area. Not a soul in sight. Just the unmoving wall of trees and the rustle of the wind. I told myself it was just stress, just the new environment. But it kept happening. Every time I was alone in the yard, the feeling would return, a phantom shadow clinging to me. The tension between Ellie and me started to escalate. He was exhausted from his new job, and I was exhausted from the pregnancy and the constant low-grade anxiety. We started fighting over the smallest things. He didn't understand my feeling of being suffocated, and I couldn't articulate my formless fears. One evening, after a particularly bad argument, he yelled, "If you can't stand it here, then go back to your family." His words felt like a physical blow. I ran to our room and sobbed. Right then, a sharp pain in my lower abdomen made me double over. Physical pain intertwined with emotional agony. I had never felt more alone or abandoned, trapped in a strange place with strange people, and a nameless dread that was growing stronger in the dark. The night was suffocatingly hot. The air was thick, not a breath of wind. Ellie was sound asleep beside me, breathing softly. I woke up with a throat so dry it felt like sandpaper. I slipped out of bed, trying not to make a sound, and tiptoed to the kitchen. I had just picked up a glass of water before I could even take a sip when the pain hit. A gut-wrenching, tearing pain more violent than anything I had ever felt. It brought me to my knees. I couldn't stop the scream that ripped from my throat. Rosalia was the first one there, followed by a groggy Ellie. She looked at me, then her eyes snapped into sharp focus. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring intently out the dark kitchen window. "Not yet," she said, her voice hard as steel. "It's not time for the birth." She turned to Ellie and commanded, "Watch your girlfriend, comfort her. I'm going outside for a minute." Ellie hadn't even processed her words before she darted out the front door, gripping what looked like a long, braided leather whip. We heard her screaming in the yard, furious curses in a strange language. Miraculously, my pain suddenly subsided, leaving only a tight, hard knot in my stomach. "Who is your mom yelling at?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know," Ellie said. Then he rushed for the door. "Stay here, I'll go check." He ran outside. I was alone in the dimly lit kitchen. I clutched my stomach, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I heard Ellie scream. A scream of pure, abject horror, a sound that will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. Seconds later, they both burst back into the house, slamming and bolting the door. His mother's face was ashen, and Ellie was shaking uncontrollably, his eyes wide, babbling. He could only manage a few words. An animal. So big, its eyes. They were red. Rosalia cut him off, her voice firm without a trace of fear. That was no animal. That was an aswang. Aswang. The name. I'd heard it in the old stories my grandmother used to tell by the fire. A blood-sucking creature that preys on pregnant women and their unborn children. I always thought it was just a fairy tale to scare kids. "It will be back," she continued. "It's here for the baby. You two get in the bedroom, lock the door. Do not come out no matter what you hear." She remained in the living room, gripping the leather whip. We scrambled into our room, locking the door. Ellie shoved our heavy dresser against it. I sat on the bed, shaking violently. Outside, his father, Pancho, who had just returned, was now fighting it. We could hear the monster's unearthly roars, Pancho's furious cursing. A final pained howl, then the sound of its heavy footsteps retreating into the night. Silence that was somehow more terrifying than the noise. The next morning, while I was still in shock, Ellie's parents left early. He told me later they said they knew who the Aswang was. They suspected Caridad, a former neighbor who had recently moved back, but they were wrong. When they returned at noon, their faces were masks of horror and betrayal. I overheard Pancho telling his wife, his voice trembling with rage. It was Lucia, Kenton's wife, my best friend. My blade's mark, it was on her arm, Lucia. The woman who always smiled, who sometimes brought us fresh baked bread, a monster in human skin. The fear inside me reached its peak. We knew who it was, but that only made it worse. Because now it had no reason to hide. Lucia's revenge was more cruel than a direct attack. It came silently, like a poison seeping into my veins. I began to fall ill, a strange sickness that no doctor in town could diagnose. My body ached, I couldn't eat, I couldn't move. I just lay there in that damp, musty bed, feeling life slowly draining out of me and my child. The worst part was that the baby stopped kicking. The silence in my own womb was more terrifying than the monster's snarl. In a final desperate act, Rosalia did the unthinkable. She went to Caridad, the very woman they had wrongly suspected. As it turned out, Caridad was a mambabarang, a type of folk healer, a witch whose power could be used to fight evil. She was the natural enemy of creatures like Lucia. She walked into my room. I recognized her as the woman I had once yelled at over nothing. Shame and despair made me cry. I could only whisper an apology. Caridad gently took my hand, her voice kind. Forget that. Be strong for your child if you want to save him. She placed her hand on my belly. A warmth spread from her touch, a strange and sudden peace, and then a faint flutter, and then another, stronger kick. Tears streamed down my face again, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. Caridad said she would return what Lucia had done, that the curse would go back to its sender. She saved both of our lives. A few days later, we heard that both Kenton and Lucia had died suddenly and mysteriously. The town gossiped that during the funeral preparations, thousands of black insects had crawled out of their bodies. The nightmare was over. A few months later, on a cool autumn morning, I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. We named him Angelo. My angel, the proof that life had won. My wedding to Ellie was a simple affair at the small church in town. Our lives slowly returned to normal, but they were never the same. The haunting remains in my dreams and the strange noises of the night. We had survived, but we were forever changed.
You've just listened to Iban's Memories, a reminder that sometimes the devils of our past are not just metaphors. Sometimes they follow us, crossing oceans, hiding behind the most familiar smiles. Louisiana, with its wild beauty, became the battlefield for an ancient war, a war between good and evil, life and death. Her story leaves us with a question. Are we ever truly safe when we leave home? Or will the ghosts of our past always find us, no matter how far we run? Thank you for listening to Horror Stories Hub. If Ivan's story resonated with you, let us know by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. And most importantly, tell us in the comments below which state's mysteries you want us to explore next. Be careful out there, because you never know what's really hiding in the dark.